When the Roman Empire fell, Europe shattered. Roads vanished, cities burned, and armies became bands of raiders. For 3 centuries, chaos ruled, until one man rose from the ashes. His vision wasn't just to rule, but to rebuild the power that Rome once held. He forged soldiers from farmers, leaders from warriors, and unity from ruins. His name was Charlemagne, and he built the first super army of post-Roman Europe. The world hadn't seen order like this since the Caesars. When Charlemagne looked across the lands of post-Roman Europe, he saw more than kingdoms and tribes. He saw fragments of a fallen empire waiting to be reassembled by will, discipline, and vision. The world he inherited was one of ruin and fear, where warlords fought for scraps of power, and people no longer believed that order could exist. Roads that once carried Roman legions now carried nothing but dust and silence. Knowledge had dimmed, unity had vanished, and armies were nothing more than chaotic mobs held together by temporary loyalty. Yet in this world of disarray, Charlemagne saw potential. He understood something that few did in his time, that no nation could rise without structure, no victory could endure without strategy, and no empire could survive without discipline. He studied the past, not to worship it, but to learn from it. The Romans had conquered through organization, and Charlemagne sought to breathe that same spirit into the heart of medieval Europe. He began to create an army, not built merely on muscle and steel, but on purpose and order. His soldiers were not mercenaries fighting for coin, but men bound by faith, loyalty, and duty to a cause greater than themselves. He redefined what it meant to fight, what it meant to serve, and what it meant to belong to something larger than one's own tribe. He knew that power without unity was weakness, and unity without leadership was chaos. So he built an empire of structure, where every soldier understood his role, every noble understood his duty, and every campaign was guided by meticulous planning. He revived the art of logistics. Supplies, routes, and timing were no longer left to chance. Armies moved with precision. Communication flowed across distances, and discipline became the soul of his military machine. What others saw as impossible, he treated as inevitable. When others sought control through fear, Charlemagne led through purpose. His presence inspired devotion, his victories demanded respect, and his vision commanded obedience. He turned loyalty into a weapon, transforming divided warriors into a unified force that marched not for conquest alone, but for civilization itself. Charlemagne's genius lay in understanding that true strength is not forged on the battlefield, but before the first sword is drawn. He trained men year-round, creating a system where warriors didn't wait for war. They prepared for it. He rewarded skill, punished indiscipline, and expected excellence from all who served him. He used the feudal system not as a social order, but as a military network. Every land grant, every position of power carried responsibility. The raising of troops, the training of knights, the safeguarding of order. Through this, his empire became a living engine of readiness. Even in times of peace, his soldiers were preparing, his commanders were planning, and his territories were reinforcing. The Frankish army evolved into a professional force whose strength lay in its coordination. Each region contributed men, horses, and supplies. Each campaign moved like a single organism, responding to the will of its leader. He saw faith not as a weakness, but as a source of unstoppable conviction. To his soldiers, battle was more than duty. It was divine mission. Their swords were not drawn only for territory, but for the defense of Christendom itself. This unity of belief gave Charlemagne's army an unmatched spirit. They fought not out of greed, but out of conviction. And conviction creates warriors who cannot be easily broken. In every campaign, from the forests of Saxony to the plains of Lombardy, Charlemagne combined military precision with spiritual purpose. His men marched under the cross and the crown, believing they were instruments of destiny. And in that belief, they found a power greater than fear. He didn't rely on the past. He rebuilt it for the future. His methods were not echoes of Rome. They were evolutions. He turned mounted warriors into the backbone of his empire. His cavalry was not merely fast. It was disciplined, trained in formations, tactics, and coordinated strikes. Each horseman knew his place in battle. Each movement was part of a larger design. His enemies often outnumbered him, but they could not outthink him. Where they fought with chaos, he fought with order. Where they relied on strength, he relied on system. His campaigns became lessons in strategy, swift, efficient, and decisive. He understood the psychology of war as deeply as the tactics of it. To his men, he was not just a king, but a commander whose vision turned battlefields into symbols of unity through his leadership. Europe began to remember what power once looked like when guided by principle and intelligence. The echo of Roman legions could be heard again in the disciplined march of Frankish troops. But this was not Rome revived. It was something new, something forged by faith and courage rather than empire and arrogance. Charlemagne's army was not built on conquest alone, but on reconstruction, the reconstruction of Europe's strength, identity, and purpose. What began as scattered tribes under separate banners became the beating heart of a continent preparing to rise again. The order he created became the foundation for centuries of European warfare, government, and culture. His military was not just a tool of dominance. It was the framework for civilization's return from darkness. Charlemagne understood that empires are not sustained by power alone, but by the systems that direct it. He recognized that the chaos consuming post-Roman Europe was not because people lacked courage, but because they lacked structure. He saw tribes that could fight but not command, kingdoms that could conquer but not govern. So he became both warrior and architect, designing a framework where strength was multiplied through order. Every soldier, every noble, every village had a defined role in his grand design. He brought the concept of responsibility to power, binding his lords by oath and duty rather than mere allegiance. Those who held land under him were not free to enjoy privilege without purpose. They were required to contribute men, weapons, and supplies to the defense and expansion of the realm. Through this balance of reward and obligation, Charlemagne created a chain of command that extended from the throne to the farthest frontier. His army was not a temporary force called upon in crisis. It was a living institution that endured beyond battles. He used communication as a weapon of control, creating messengers and networks that connected regions once isolated by distance. Orders were delivered with precision, reports returned swiftly, and strategy evolved in real time. He made sure that knowledge moved as efficiently as armies. Roads were repaired and new ones built. Fortresses became centers of both defense and coordination, and every campaign was mapped with foresight. He studied his enemies not only through scouts, but through understanding their culture, their habits, and their weaknesses. He fought not just with steel, but with intelligence, always seeking to outthink before he outfought. His armies moved with rhythm and timing, attacking when the enemy was unprepared and withdrawing when the cost outweighed the gain. He valued patience as much as aggression, knowing that true dominance is not in the number of victories, but in the endurance of control. He inspired his men by example. He shared their hardships, slept among them during campaigns, and led from the front when the situation demanded it. To them, he was not distant royalty, but a warrior king who carried both crown and sword. His courage was a language they understood, his discipline a standard they sought to match. Under his command, cowardice was despised, loyalty was sacred, and competence was the currency of advancement. Merit replaced inheritance on the battlefield. A peasant could rise through bravery just as easily as a noble could fall through failure. This meritocratic spark, rare for its time, gave his army motivation beyond duty. Men fought for recognition, for honor, and for the chance to serve a cause that promised them identity and purpose. Each campaign became a test of not only force, but faith, loyalty, and intellect. Charlemagne's understanding of logistics made him a master of sustained warfare. He ensured that his troops were supplied even during long campaigns across hostile lands. Granaries were built along marching routes, rivers were used to transport provisions, and blacksmiths accompanied the army to maintain weapons and armor. Nothing was left to chance, and nothing was wasted. He realized that an army's strength dies not in battle, but in hunger, fatigue, and confusion. So he fought not only for victory on the field, but for endurance in the journey. His campaigns lasted months, sometimes years, and yet his forces remained cohesive because they were built on planning rather than impulse. Every victory added confidence, every conquest brought new resources, and every setback became a lesson written into the strategy of the next campaign. He also understood the psychological dimension of war. He knew that the mind breaks before the body, and he used that knowledge to dominate his enemies. His approach combined fear and respect. He crushed rebellion with force, but followed victory with structure. Those who submitted were given laws, schools, and faith. Those who resisted faced annihilation. His reputation alone often won wars before they began. To hear that? What if fixing a Ferrari could change your entire life? This isn't just a story about cars, it's about love, honesty, and a challenge that no one saw coming. She said, "Fix this Ferrari, and you can marry my daughter." But his reply left everyone speechless. Before we start, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories like this. And don't forget to comment below what you would do if you were in his place. In Los Angeles, where dreams move as fast as the cars on the freeway, a young mechanic named Ethan Cole worked quietly in a small garage on Sunset Boulevard. His days were filled with grease, the hum of engines, and the sound of classic rock from an old radio. Ethan wasn't rich, but he was skilled, one of those rare people who could bring any car back to life with nothing but passion and patience. Still, deep down, he dreamed of something more. Something that would take him beyond the walls of his workshop. One hot afternoon, a tow truck pulled up in front of Ethan's garage, carrying a stunning red Ferrari 458 Italia. The car was a wreck, its front bumper smashed, paint faded, and the engine lifeless. Ethan couldn't believe what he was seeing. He ran his hand over the fender, admiring the curves beneath the damage. Before he could ask questions, a man in a suit stepped out of a black SUV parked nearby and handed him a crisp white card. "Mr. Charles Dalton requests your expertise," he said curtly before leaving. Ethan flipped the card in his hand. The name Charles Dalton sounded familiar. He'd seen it on billboards, magazines, and luxury car advertisements. Charles Dalton was one of the wealthiest men in California, the founder of Dalton Motors, a company that built some of the most powerful engines in the country. Ethan couldn't imagine why someone like him would need a small-town mechanic. Still, curiosity burned in his chest, and that night, he found himself driving through the tall gates of a Beverly Hills mansion that looked like something out of a movie. When Ethan stepped inside, he was met with pure elegance, marble floors, golden chandeliers, and walls filled with art. He felt out of place, but his eyes soon met someone who made him forget everything else. Standing near the grand staircase was Sophia Dalton, the billionaire's daughter. She wasn't just beautiful. She carried herself with kindness and confidence. She smiled when their eyes met, and for a brief moment Ethan forgot why he was even there. But then the deep voice of her father broke the silence, echoing across the hall. "Ethan Cole," said Mr. Dalton, stepping forward with authority. "I've heard you're the best mechanic in town." Ethan nodded nervously. "I do my best, sir." Mr. Dalton motioned toward the window where the damaged Ferrari was visible in the driveway. "That car belonged to my late wife. It hasn't run in over 10 years. Every expert I've hired has failed to restore it." Ethan looked at the car again, realizing its emotional value. "If you can fix it," Mr. Dalton continued, "I'll give you anything you ask for." Ethan hesitated. "Anything, sir?" he asked carefully. Mr. Dalton smiled, but there was a hint of challenge in his eyes. "Yes, even my daughter's hand in marriage," Sophia gasped. "Dad, you can't be serious." But Mr. Dalton raised a hand to silence her. "Let's see what the young man is made of," he said coolly. Ethan looked between them, Sophia's shocked face and Mr. Dalton's calculating gaze, and though his heart raced, he replied quietly, "Challenge accepted." That night, Ethan returned to his garage with the Ferrari on a flatbed truck. As he turned on the workshop lights, the red paint shimmered beneath the glow. He walked around it slowly, studying every inch. The car was more than just metal. It was history, love, and loss, all built into one machine. He didn't see it as a way to win someone's daughter. He saw it as an opportunity to prove himself, to create something beautiful again. He decided then that he wouldn't stop until that Ferrari roared back to life. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan worked tirelessly. He ordered parts from Italy, studied the original blueprints, and even contacted retired Ferrari engineers online for guidance. Every night, long after the city went to sleep, Ethan stayed in his garage, covered in grease, with tools scattered around him. He was exhausted but driven by something stronger than money or fame. Every time he felt like giving up, he thought about Sophia's smile and the story behind the car. It reminded him that this was more than a challenge. It was a promise. Sometimes Sophia visited the garage. She would bring coffee and sit on a stool, watching him work. They talked about life, about her late mother who loved speed and freedom, and about Ethan's childhood fixing cars with his dad. Those quiet moments slowly built a friendship, and behind the sound of tools and engines, something tender began to grow. Sophia admired his sincerity and humility, and Ethan found himself caring less about impressing her father and more about making her proud. One night, as Ethan tightened the final bolts on the rebuilt engine, he sat back and listened to the ticking sound of the cooling metal. He realized he had fallen in love, not just with Sophia, but with the process, the purpose, and the meaning behind the task. It wasn't about winning anything. It was about restoring something broken. And maybe, in a way, fixing the car had also fixed a part of him that had been lost for years. After 3 long months, the Ferrari was ready. Ethan stood before it, hands trembling slightly as he wiped the hood one last time. The car gleamed like new, the deep red paint shining under the morning sun. He turned the key slowly, and the engine came alive with a deep, smooth growl. It was perfect. For a moment, Ethan just stood there, smiling quietly to himself. He had done it. Not for money, not for a deal, but for love, respect, and something far greater. When Mr. Dalton arrived to see the car, the disbelief on his face said it all. He couldn't believe the same broken Ferrari had been reborn. He turned to Ethan and said, "You did it, son. A deal's a deal. You can marry my daughter." The words hung in the air like thunder. Sophia looked shocked, waiting for Ethan's response. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding, knowing that what he was about to say would change everything. Ethan looked at Mr. Dalton, then at Sophia, who was standing silently beside him. The engine of the Ferrari purred softly in the background, filling the tense air with its rhythmic hum. For a moment, nobody spoke. Ethan could feel everyone's eyes on him. The proud father, the stunned daughter, and the few workers who had gathered to witness the moment. He took a slow breath, his heart pounding, before finally speaking the words that no one expected to hear. "Sir," he said calmly, "I didn't fix your Ferrari to win your daughter. I fixed it because it deserved to live again." The entire room went silent. Sophia blinked in surprise, unsure if she had heard him right. Mr. Dalton, for the first time, seemed uncertain. Ethan continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "That car wasn't just a machine. It was a memory, a part of your wife's life, something she loved. Every dent and every broken piece told a story. I didn't see it as a deal. I saw it as a way to honor her, and maybe to help you remember her the way she deserves." Mr. Dalton's confident expression began to soften. He had spent years closing deals, making business decisions that revolved around numbers and power. But in this young mechanic's words, he heard something he had almost forgotten: heart. Sophia's eyes welled up with tears, and she took a step closer to Ethan, sensing his sincerity. "So you don't want to marry her?" Mr. Dalton finally asked, almost defensively. Ethan smiled faintly. "With all due respect, sir, marriage shouldn't be a reward. It should be a choice made from love, not a transaction. For a long moment, Mr. Dalton just stood there, his gaze shifting between Ethan and his daughter. Then unexpectedly he laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that echoed across the garage. "You've got courage, son," he said, shaking his head. "Most men would have jumped at the chance to marry into money, but you're different." Ethan said nothing, simply wiping his hands with a rag and nodding respectfully. He wasn't looking for approval. He had already found his peace in the sound of that restored Ferrari engine. Sophia approached Ethan slowly, her heart racing. "You really meant what you said, didn't you?" she whispered. Ethan nodded, his brown eyes warm and sincere. "I meant every word. Your mother's spirit was in that car, and I didn't want to fail her memory. I didn't do it for your father or for myself. I did it for something that mattered." Sophia smiled softly, her tears falling freely now. "You're the kind of man she would have loved," she said quietly. "And maybe, so do I." From that day forward, Ethan continued working in his small garage, but things were never the same. Word spread quickly through Los Angeles about the mechanic who had restored the Dalton Ferrari, the impossible repair that no expert could handle. But more than the technical feat, people admired the story behind it. A man who valued love and respect above wealth and status. Customers lined up at his shop, not because of fame, but because they trusted his heart as much as his hands. Sophia began visiting more often, no longer out of curiosity, but because she genuinely enjoyed being there. She brought lunch, coffee, and sometimes just laughter. The two spent hours talking about life, about dreams, about everything that wasn't money or power. Slowly, love grew between them, not forced, not arranged, but real and natural. Mr. Dalton noticed the bond forming, but said nothing. Deep down, he knew this was something even he couldn't control. It was destiny. The story of Charlemagne is the story of a man who refused to accept the limits of his time. When he came to power, Europe was fractured, broken by centuries of invasion, betrayal, and isolation. The light of Rome had long faded, and in its place stood kingdoms that knew nothing of unity or law. But Charlemagne did not see a continent beyond saving. He saw one waiting to be reborn. From the moment he wore the crown of the Franks, he carried within him a vision far greater than conquest. He wanted to rebuild the idea of civilization itself, to bring back the strength, the knowledge, and the order that had once defined greatness. Yet his mission could not begin with words or promises. It had to begin with power, with an army capable of enforcing peace, of protecting law, and of turning vision into reality. He began by transforming warriors into soldiers, and soldiers into servants of purpose. He restructured how men fought and why they fought. No longer would war be for plunder or pride. Under Charlemagne, it became a duty bound to faith and destiny. He built loyalty through discipline, commanding not only obedience but belief. He established ranks, trained knights, standardized weapons, and built networks of supply that could feed and arm entire campaigns. The chaos that once defined medieval warfare was replaced with precision. Each unit had a function, each commander had accountability, and each soldier understood that his service was part of something vast. Charlemagne didn't just lead battles, he orchestrated them. He moved his forces like an artist moves a brush across a canvas, each strike deliberate, each maneuver planned. His wars were not waged to destroy, but to shape, to carve unity out of division. He knew that to rule through strength alone was to build on sand. So while his soldiers fought, his administrators built, his scholars taught, and his clergy preached. The same order that defined his army began to flow into his empire. Roads were repaired, trade routes revived, borders fortified. Cities that had fallen silent under decay came alive again, with markets, learning, and life. He enforced laws with fairness, but without mercy for corruption. His justice reached from the lowest peasant to the highest noble. He believed that power meant responsibility, and with that responsibility came the duty to lift the weak as well as lead the strong. The people began to see in him not just a king, but a guardian of a new order, one who carried the sword of faith and the wisdom of purpose. Charlemagne's vision extended beyond his borders. He understood that Europe could not survive as a scattered land of tribes and feuding lords. He sought not only to conquer but to unify. Through war, he brought regions together. Through governance, he made them last. His empire stretched from the Pyrenees to the Danube, a patchwork of languages, cultures, and beliefs, yet bound by a single ideal: order. He made sure that every ruler under him, every knight who swore loyalty, every priest who preached in his name, shared the same foundation of discipline and devotion. He created an empire that mirrored the strength of its leader: unbroken, organized, purposeful. His conquests became lessons in governance, each new territory a chance to perfect the system he had envisioned. He also saw faith not as decoration, but as the glue that held civilization together. In his eyes, belief gave meaning to duty. He worked hand in hand with the church, spreading Christianity as both a moral and political force. Every battle fought in his name carried not just the promise of land, but the promise of salvation. His soldiers saw themselves as instruments of divine order, their victories not just triumphs of arms, but of purpose. To Charlemagne, faith was not weakness. It was command over the heart. It made men fearless, united them under a shared mission, and turned conquest into transformation. He believed that to rule men's actions, one must first guide their souls. As his empire expanded, Charlemagne never allowed comfort to dull his ambition. He continued to travel, to inspect, to correct, to lead. He walked among his people, spoke to his soldiers, learned from his advisors. He wanted his presence to remind all who saw him that leadership is service, not privilege. Even in triumph, he remained vigilant, knowing that the greatest threat to an empire is not the enemy outside its borders, but the decay within. He set standards for education, for governance, for faith, ensuring that the systems he built would outlast him. His reign became not just a rule, but a transformation, a turning point where Europe began to rediscover what it meant to be strong, disciplined and united when he was crowned emperor in the year 800. It was more than ceremony. It was the recognition that after centuries of darkness, Europe had once again found its order. The crown did not make him great. It confirmed what his actions had already proven, that he had rebuilt the foundation of civilization on the ruins of chaos. His empire became a symbol of what discipline, vision, and faith could achieve when led by a single will. He had taken a continent of tribes and given it identity. He had revived the spirit of Rome, but this time grounded it in belief rather than pride. His legacy was not in the battles he fought, but in the structure he left behind. The example he set and the system he built that turned war into order, and order into rebirth. Charlemagne's empire did not endure in its borders, but it endured in its spirit. He proved that leadership is not about how many lands one conquers, but how deeply one transforms them. He took a shattered world and gave it rhythm, a direction, a heartbeat once again. His vision ignited the rebirth of Europe, shaping kings, armies, and nations for centuries to come. The systems he built became the foundation of Western civilization, and his philosophy of discipline, unity, and purpose became the blueprint for every empire that followed. Charlemagne's power was not merely in his sword, but in his mind, in his ability to see order where others saw only ruins. He showed that true greatness is not born from chaos, but from the will to conquer it, not once, but forever.